fuel pump access, you got to pull these two little tangs here to pop that quarter seat out, or half, I guess this is a half seat. Take 3 bolts out, get that panel off, unplug these 2 plugs, take these 3 bolts, take the panel off anyway. Unplug these 2 plugs, okay, and then we're gonna disconnect these fuel lines, and there's some other lines over here on the side here that need to be disconnected. We'll just have to get to those slowly, one at a time. But to get that gas tank loose, on one end you've got this bracket with 3 bolts in there, and of course I took the fuel pump protect bracket off that holds, not the fuel pump, sorry, the fuel filter protect bracket, and take these other bolts out. Yeah, the fuel filter bracket has 2 bolts and 1 nut, and then these other bolts that hold the tank in, there's a shield that holds that tank. So this shield here kind of bolts to the bottom of it. You just take the bolts out on the ends, and that gets that loose. And then there's some other ones you got to take out to get the tank out the rest of the way. And here in the back you'll see that there's a couple bolts that bolt to this bracket here. You got to take those out. And the tank it has like a lip in the front that hooks it to drop the back down and slide it back some to get it to move. Now on these 2 connectors here, what I do is you squeeze that little connector like this, and then that allows you to push it off. And I can do it with one hand, because I've done it a bunch of times, and I kind of know how it works. But you see how it releases it a little bit, and then you can just wiggle it and slide it forward. But we're pulling this fuel tank because it's contaminated with bad gas. So from this point here, they're loose. I can get a little bit more space in there, move those out of the way, and get to those other connectors and stuff back here, and the fuel inlet tube that comes from the gas cap. Get that little guy loose and get this thing to a point where we can get it out, because right now the progress has stopped because of all these lines. So that's it. Let's get it to the next step. And I will remind anyone that messes with this stuff, always have good ventilation. Be careful with these little plastic connectors, and you might have to disconnect or loosen the fuel line at the fuel pressure rail. This particular vehicle does not have a Schrader valve for checking fuel pressure, or I couldn't find one. If it does, let me know, but I don't think it does. You have to loosen up there to let the pressure out of the line, because if you pop one of these loose here, it may be very difficult to pop loose because of the pressure. And if you do get it loose and pop it off, it'll spray fuel everywhere. So we don't want to do that. You have to be careful with fuel. Release the pressure, then disconnect these. And I should have said that beforehand. But anyway, that's where we're at now. Be careful with fuel. Alright, so I got all the lines disconnected there. And tank is loose. Just need to drop it down. Let's go up under there and have a look. As you can see on the back, see this back has to drop down past this little hump here. I can get it in the picture. Well, I can't. Let me get over here. It's going to have to drop down past this so that it can move back some, because this front edge is on a lip. It's on this little lip here. Won't come down until it passes that lip. I'm not even going to try it with one hand and show you guys on the camera, but this is going to have to be good enough. I was going to take the drive shaft out, but I stopped and I said, well, let me try it without that. But that's what it looks like from the bottom. Those plugs are accessible from the bottom, but the ones for the fuel lines are almost impossible to get to from the bottom without taking that fuel access door off. And it's so easy to get that fuel access door off, it's not even funny. So that would be the way to go. This is what it looks like from the fuel filter side. Got it all loose and just took the bolts out. You know, I moved this around so I could get to some of these bolts here. I think this bolt in this corner here, right here, is probably the hardest one to get to. And I did that with a box-end wrench, 17mm. Alright, so that's what it looks like when it comes down. That's all the hoses and junk there, and as you can see, the fuel lines are just on little 90-degree connectors. Those swivel out of the way easily, but those other ones, I tried to get them off best I could, but they all cracked. So I'm going to have to either replace them or cut them back or something. I'll figure that out later. But that's what it looks like. That's what everything looks like down here. There's not much to look at. I'm using a transmission jack, which is too high to get things off. I'm going to have to slide this thing off on the ground to get it out from under here. I've already got it pretty high up in the air to begin with. Let's see what happens here in a minute and get this thing out of here. Alright, so I just slid that thing off on my creeper. That worked just fine. And as we can see, previous work had lost a bolt and did put this bolt in there, and that's probably why we got problems. So let's get this thing off and find out. Alright, so we got all kinds of problems here. We got these two little type connectors that connect to the fuel lines. And of course that fuel pump, it's down in there somewhere. Now this little connector here, when I squeezed it to get it off, it just came off with it, and that's fine. I'll put it back on there. But it's got a little module that goes in there. If I can get to it, here we go. This plastic module sits in there about like this. Yeah, it sits in there about like this. These two ports here are facing towards the fuel inlet and the vapor hoses and whatnot right here. So that's how it sets in there. I don't see a clocking mechanism, but it's got this elaborate thing for the fuel level indicator float to set on. And of course you've got these two little clips. You got to squeeze those to get those off. There's one electrical connector right here. You got to get that little guy off. See where he's at. Fell down in there. Probably a good idea to replace this. This one looks pretty shabby, like it's getting hot, burnt, back connection, whatever. Replace it, it's not that big of a deal. I need to pull the rest of that junk out of there, as long as I don't drop my phone in the hole, right? Need to pull the rest of this junk out of here and see what we got. Kind of hard to see with the light, but anyway. There's a fuel pump down in there. And this line here, you can see that whoever had done the previous work didn't put a clamp on it. Look at that. And it just pops off. So that's not a good thing there. We need to fix that. It might have been that way from the factory, I don't know. But I'd like to have a clamp on it. Keep on going out of focus. But this is where the problem is. This is where the dirt and the water contamination is coming from. Now this O-ring was laying here kind of off kilter like this. There was no bolt in this position here. And this, of course, this O-ring is gone. I'm going to have to get another one at the dealer or something. And get this cleaned up. Now this particular bolt here was stripped out. So I'm going to have to fix that. Next size up bolt, re-thread it or something, re-tap it. Get it cleaned up. It's full of nasty business, so let me get this to the next step.